Hello, everyone. This morning, you had the pleasure of hearing from our incoming RI President, Shekhar. This evening, I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. John Huco, who is the General Secretary and CEO of Rotary International. Mr. Huco has held this position for over 10 years, and in this role, he oversees the operations of both Rotary International and the Rotary Foundation. Let me give you a little background to Mr. Huco. From 2004 to 2009, Mr. Huco was part of the Millennium Challenge Corporation, which is a U.S. government agency to deliver foreign assistance to the world's poorest countries. Prior to joining Millennium, Mr. Huco was an international partner with the prestigious law firm of Baker & McKinsey, where he was based in Eastern Europe. Mr. Huco holds a law degree from Harvard University, a master's in modern history from Oxford University, and a bachelor's in government and Soviet studies from Hamilton College. He and his wife, Margarita, live in Evanston and are major donors to the Rotary Foundation. We are fortunate to have such an experienced and strategic leader as CEO of Rotary. Please welcome John Huco as he presents the Rotary Strategic Plan and its action items.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff, for that very kind introduction, and I'm delighted to be here at this North Central Pets. First of all, let me start by congratulating District Governor-elects, the President-elects, President nominees who are participating in this Pets. Congratulations on your selection, your election as incoming officers and club presidents in Rotary. And to say that I very much look forward to working with each and every one of you as we move our organization forward. Rotary, again, begins and ends at the club level, and we're all about the clubs. It's an association of Rotary clubs. And so the work that you as presidents of your respective clubs will be doing is going to be absolutely vital for our organization's future, and of course led in your districts by your very, very capable district governor-elect. So again, sincere congratulations to all of you, and again, it's a delight to be here. What I'd like to do is divide my comments to you into two sections. First, to just give you an overview of where our organization stands today. And then secondly, where we're headed, and particularly how the various challenges that we're going to be facing fit into our strategic plans, and then finish with some concrete, specific actions that I would suggest you consider taking when you become president to deal with our organization in terms of moving it forward, and also to work toward the various priorities in our strategic plan. So as your general secretary, my primary obligation is to oversee the Rotary International Secretariat. As you're aware, our headquarters are located in Evanston, Illinois. It's a city that abuts Chicago. We have about 750 employees in the Secretariat worldwide. Around 550 are in our headquarters in Evanston, and we have another 250 that are in our various offices, 7 offices outside of the United States. And it became very clear to me back in January of last year, when this sort of the virus was beginning to appear in Asia, that the situation was not going to go very, very well. I'd had the privilege of representing Rotary at Davos for several years, and in several of those times, I was able to participate in some very sophisticated sort of workshops to sort of figure out, is the world ready to respond to a pandemic? And coming out of those workshops, it was very clear to me that the world was not. And so already in January of 2020, I put together a COVID task force within the Secretariat to really get us ready as an organization to move to this new normal, this virtual reality that we're living in. And I'm very, very glad we did, because we were able to take those 2 months of January and February and work out a lot of issues in our systems. I sent the entire Secretariat home for a day to practice what it would be like working virtually. I'm glad we did that as well. We got a lot of kinks out of the system doing that. And then on March 12th, we went to a full virtual environment for the entire Secretariat. And I must say that today, as I speak, we continue to support you, the Rotarians, as we did pre-COVID. In fact, many areas of the Secretariat are working harder than ever. As you're aware, we had to cancel our convention in Honolulu last June and to quickly pivot and put on a virtual convention. Our International Assembly, where we train our district governor-elects, is held at the beginning of each calendar year, was again held virtually this year. We were not able to hold it in Orlando in person. And our Taipei convention, will be now virtual rather than in person. And so as an organization, we've had to really quickly pivot and move many of our efforts from what we traditionally do, which are obviously physical meetings, to this new online existence that we have. So extraordinarily proud of our organization, how we've been able to pivot, how we've been able to successfully transition to this new environment. So as I speak to you today from an operational perspective, Rotary is strong, Rotary is in great shape, and we continue to operate and function, obviously not exactly the way we were prior to the to COVID, but I think operationally we're on very, very sound footing. And then the Secretariat continues to support the Rotarians, the Rotarians, as we had pre-COVID. Similarly, financially, I get a lot of questions on what do we think is going to happen to our membership, or what is happening to our membership in light of this COVID pandemic. And I've always like to sort of manage by data, not by intuition, not by anecdote. And we're very fortunate to have on staff a PhD statistician. And so I asked him to look at the last 116 years of Rotary history and see what's happened historically to our membership going back to our founding in 1905, and then using all that 16 years worth of data to put together a mathematical model to see what could we anticipate are happening to our membership going forward. And what's interesting is if you look back at our history, there's only 1 year, and that was 2 years after the Great Depression in the 1930s, that we saw a significant drop in membership, and that was a little over 5%. And all the other great crises that the world has faced since our founding, whether it be world wars, pandemics, financial crises, we've seen membership either paradoxically increase, or to the extent it's decreased in sort of in the 1 to 2% range. And that's kind of what we've seen from last year to this year. We saw a membership drop of a little over 1%. And so we have to remember that a 1% drop in our membership represents about an $800,000 loss of revenue to Rotary. And so even if we were to suffer a loss of 5%, which again has only happened once in our history, that's about a $4 million loss of revenues. Unfortunately, Rotary leaders through the decades have been very, very prudent with your money. And so financially, Rotary has put together very significant and good reserves, which I think place us in a very good position to weather this crisis. And similarly, the Rotary Foundation has ample reserves, which I think will be more than adequate to help us get through this crisis. So I think operationally, we're very, very strong. And I think from a financial perspective, both Rotary International and the Rotary Foundation, I think, are on very solid financial footing. Again, thanks in large measure to the very prudent steps that Rotary leadership has taken through the years. And then extrapolating out, what can we sort of anticipate happening based on all that number crunching that our statistician did? And what we're projecting out is that we'll see sort of membership fluctuating in a band of between 1 to 2% positive negative. And so again, operationally we're strong, financially we're strong, and as we look forward in terms of what we anticipate happening with our membership, at least the mathematical modeling does not indicate that we're going to see severe declines in membership. We do have issues in North America, and I'll get to that later on in my comments. Now, in terms of where are we in terms of polio, our signature global initiative, and of course we had to stop our polio eradication efforts back early last year because of COVID. They've now resumed. We had a bit of a setback, but we're really sort of back in action in terms of vaccination campaigns, obviously adhering to all of the safety protocols. We're still down to just 2 countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan, where the wild polio virus is still circulating. We've had 2 cases so far this year, 1 in Pakistan, 1 in Afghanistan. We had 140 last year, 176 the year before. So we're getting there. But the challenges are still there. Obviously, COVID does not make it as easy as it was before to vaccinate. And so my really request to all of you, as you assume the mantle of your club presidencies in the next few months, is that we need to, if anything, redouble our efforts on polio. We really need to redouble our efforts to raise money, to make up for some of the lost ground due to COVID, and to make sure that we maximize the 2-to-1 match that we have with the Gates Foundation. As you're aware, for every 50 million we raise and spend in a given calendar year, we get another 100 million from the Gates Foundation. We raised the 50 million last calendar year. We got the check for 100 million in January. We need to make sure we do it again this calendar year. And your work and your encouragement to your fellow Rotarians is going to be critical to ensure that we maximize that Gates match and do everything we can to bring this terrible disease of polio to an end. And then finally, on COVID, I think all of us as Rotarians can be extraordinarily proud of what our organization has done in terms of reacting to the COVID crisis. Early last year already, the Rotary Foundation trustees put together a COVID disaster response fund. It grew to about a little over $7 million. Each district in the Rotary world was eligible to apply for a one-time $25,000 grant that was related to COVID projects and activities. Over 300 districts received a COVID response grant. That $7 million fund has now been exhausted. In addition, we approved the global grants of well over $20 million that were specifically COVID related. So in the span of the first few short months of this COVID crisis, we moved globally over $30 million in funding for COVID related projects. And that of course doesn't even touch the surface of what the clubs and the districts and the regions have been doing in terms of PPE, food, you name it, helping out. It's advocating for vaccine acceptance, et cetera. I mean, the response globally as I travel the world, Rotary world virtually, has been absolutely extraordinary. So I think all of us as Rotarians can be extremely proud of what our organization has done in terms of our response to COVID, and very proud of what we're going to continue to do moving forward. So just a brief overview of where we are as an organization today. I think we're on financially sound footing. Operationally, we continue as we were before. Polio is back on track, but we need to make sure we hit that Gates match this calendar year. And finally, with respect to COVID, I think all of us can be extraordinarily proud of how we have stepped up to the plate and really made a difference all around the world with respect to this COVID crisis. Now, where are we headed? And how do I at least see our future? And how does all this fit into our strategic plan? As you know, the strategic plan is based on four priorities: to increase our impact, expand our reach, enhance participant engagement, and increase our ability to adapt. So I'd like to touch on a number of issues that directly relate to these four priorities and how we can actually move our organization forward. You know, there's no question that the world is living through horrific times. Human cost, the economic cost of this pandemic have been tragic and obviously unprecedented, certainly in all of our lifetimes. And so as we look at the horizon, it may seem like it's just this wall of black clouds. And I think for Rotary, I would posit that although the situation for the world is extraordinarily difficult, although the situation for our country, the United States, is extremely difficult, I think for Rotary, I do see a lot of white clouds on that horizon, because I think this is an extraordinary opportunity for our organization to really take an even further leap forward as an organization. You know, in a sense, I would argue that we're at a bit of a crossroads. You know, for many years, we've been really trying hard to get Rotarians to embrace technology. And it's been a real struggle. We're an organization deeply steeped in traditions, and it's been a bit of a heavy lift. And all of a sudden, in March of last year, the entire Rotary world, 1.2 million Rotarians, had no choice but to move to a virtual environment. And we've seen that it's not been all that bad. Now, obviously, we can't wait to get back to the way life was pre-COVID. But we've also seen that we can do things differently, that we can utilize technology in a way that's going to paradoxically connect us more than we were beforehand. I mean, I usually start my day in the morning giving a speech, I don't know, somewhere in India, and by the evening time, I'm giving one in California, and everything in between. With the press of a button, you can reach thousands and thousands of Rotarians, again, with the press of a button and with no cost. Stories of Rotarians visiting other clubs and participating in club meetings is legion. And my wife is the president-elect of the Chicago Club, Chicago One. In fact, she's doing her pets training upstairs as I'm speaking, and she, you know, we'll go to 5 or 6, 7 different club meetings during the course of the week and hear all around the world and hear fantastic speakers that you know, she would not have been able to hear and see if we weren't able to utilize this technology. So I do think we're at the crossroads. And what is, in my view, at least in North America, the biggest challenge we need to face? And here I'm going to be very, very blunt. We face a membership crisis in North America, in the United States. US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, UK are seeing significant membership declines. The numbers don't lie. There's no way around it. And the only reason as an organization we've been able to stay flat for 1.2 million over the last 20-some years is because we've seen significant growth in Asia, Africa, parts of Eastern Europe, and other parts of the world. But we can't sugarcoat it. We have a membership crisis in the United States. And so the question is, and the challenge to all of us, and particularly a challenge to you as president-elects of your respective clubs going forward, and to the district governors-elect, is what are we going to do about it? How do we take advantage of this crisis, as horrible as it's been, to really take perhaps our organization in a new direction and begin reversing some of these membership trends that we've been seeing? And for me, it really comes down to the fact that we're selling a product. And the product we're selling is the club experience. The experience one gets when one joins a Rotary club, when one joins your respective clubs. And you pay with that experience with your time and with your money. And we're finding that in the United States, at least, people are either not buying our product, or when they buy it, they find out it wasn't what it was all cracked up to be. In fact, last year as an organization, globally, we had 150,000 people join Rotary, but we also had 150,000 people leave Rotary. So we have an issue of not only member attraction, but we've got one also of member retention. So what can we do about it? In my view, we need to rethink our product in those areas where it's not working as it used to be. And again, let me be clear, what can never change is our core values, the four-way test, the focus on ethics, fellowship, the core things that make up Rotary, the DNA of Rotary. Those, in my view, are immutable. They're fixed in stone. But how we organize our meetings, meeting frequency, the sorts of the product that we offer, the experience that we offer, is not so much, in my view, a value. It's the vessel. The way we hold our meetings is the vessel through which we deliver our values. And so my call to action to you, one of them, and it'll be several through before I finish, is we need to rethink our product. If the traditional club model is working for your club, no problem. Carry on. Everything is fine. But if it's not, then, it's not like Einstein says, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. The market is not going to change for us. We need to change for the market. And now there's tremendous flexibility in the ability for clubs to offer an experience that may not meet the traditional model. There is no, people may not like to hear this, but there is no Rotary police. There is no Rotary police. What's important for me is not so much adherence to strict rules for clubs, but fashioning a product that works, that attracts members that we want to attract, that's doing great projects, that's growing and that's thriving. And so I'd urge you as president-elects to step back and look at your club. And if it's not working or if it's not what you'd like it to be, to really aggressively begin thinking about how can we change the product that we're offering to make it more attractive to the demographic and to the people that we are trying to attract. And so we have our 4 pillars of the strategic plan, which I outlined, but they all rise and fall on our members, both the quality and quantity of our members. The greater our membership base, the more we have the ability to make an impact. The more members we have, the more donors to our Rotary Foundation, the more funding out of our foundation, the bigger and the better our projects, the more our impact, the more attractive we become, the more we enhance the participant experience by giving Rotarians more new and exciting projects to work on. And so we're at a crossroads. We have a strategic plan. We have 4 priorities. And in some ways, I would say your years as president are going to be your year as president is going to be one of the most important in our organization's history. Because again, we're at a crossroads, we're at a unique point in history, and we're at a time when we can take advantage of the disruption that this pandemic has caused to really think differently and take our organization in a new way. So let me close with 6 or 5 calls to action. And my wife says, John, whenever you give 5 calls to action, people are going to forget it by the 3rd one, they're going to forget. But I'll take my chances and I'll share with you what I would say are 5 critical calls of action to support those 4 pillars of our strategic plan. The first has to do with member retention. We need to come out of this crisis, in my view, as strong as we were going into it. And that means retaining our current members. And globally, when we look at the statistics, it's very clear that the longer one stays in Rotary, the less likely you are to leave. And the real danger point for people leaving our organization is between the second and third year of membership. That's when we see the largest exodus of people from our organization. So we need to focus on member retention. We need to focus on engaging our members, but particularly focus on those who are newer to Rotary. And that means when they join the club, give them an assignment immediately. When they join the club, get them involved in a project that they're passionate about. Because those newer members, those that are in Rotary 1, 2, 3 years, those are the ones that are most likely to leave our organization. Second is our projects. You know, the world needs Rotary more than ever, and I'll talk about that at the end of my comments. Our projects are needed more than ever, but our projects have been historically people getting together and doing things. Well, we're going to be hopefully not for that much longer, but we're still sort of in this, you know, virtual environment, quasi lockdowns, et cetera. How are we going to continue to do our projects and make a difference in this new normal that we're now living in? And we need to therefore sort of unleash the creativity of our Rotarians, the creativity of your clubs to really think through how can we modify the way in which we do projects that adapt to this new reality. The third is fundraising. Again, historically, our fundraising activities have been physical events, people getting together, walkathons, bikeathons, $1 million dinners. Well, at least in the short term, that's not going to be possible. So we really need to put on our creative juices and think about how we're going to fundraise in this new environment, this new digital environment. And for me, the gold standard is that Als Ice Bucket Challenge. I don't know if you remember it, a while ago, people were dumping ice all over themselves, and I did the same thing. And I think they raised a couple $100 million for ALS. It cost them nothing, not a penny. And in fact, it wasn't even their idea. Somebody who wasn't involved in, I think, from what I understand, in the ALS movement, had came up with the idea. So what's going to be our next ALS Ice Bucket Challenge? How are we going to really be able to leverage this new reality that we're in, technology, to help with our fundraising efforts? Fourth, we hear anecdotally about how clubs are, you know, more connected in some ways than ever. You know, hey, our club used to have 50% attendance when we met in person. Now we're up to 95 because it's easy. People participate in our virtual meetings. But I also suspect there are a lot of clubs that are not meeting and they're struggling, whether it be technology or whatever other reason. And if those clubs continue now going at least a year and perhaps even more without really being effective functioning clubs, they're going to die, and they're not going to survive this crisis. And so if you're aware of clubs in your area, in your town, in your region, in your district that are struggling, let's really reach out to them. Let's focus on them. Let's get them back on track, because we need to, as I said, ensure that we come out of this crisis as strong as we were going into it. And then finally, let me just close on this last thought. You know, again, the sky is not falling for Rotary. In fact, I would argue that the world needs Rotary now more than ever. In fact, I would say we were built for moments like this. Deep roots in every community in the world. In fact, I like to say there's not a politician in the world that doesn't have a Rotarian as a constituent. In fact, this is our moment. Just remember Herb Brooks, at least in the movie Miracle on Ice, before the U.S. hockey team went out to play the Soviets in Lake Placid in 1980. He's in the locker room, and I'm paraphrasing it here, right beforehand, he's saying, gentlemen, this is our moment. This is our moment. And I think this is Rotary's moment. This is Rotary's moment to take that next leap forward. But it's going to require creativity, it's going to require boldness, and it's going to require really, really thinking out of the blocks to take our product, which has been an extraordinary product for the last 116 years, and change it and modify it where necessary and in the ways that are necessary to make ourselves more attractive to new members, to make ourselves more attractive to new sponsors. And that may be taking existing clubs and reforming them, or creating new clubs with new ways of doing things in a new way to perhaps attract those additional new members that we so very much want to bring into our fantastic organization. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity to address you. I wish you all the best in the next Rotary year. And again, we at the Secretariat are here to support you, to support your efforts. Please utilize us, and also come and visit us. Once we're back to normal, we do welcome groups of Rotarians from all over the world to come. come visit us and do a great tour of the building. We can provide you with briefings. You can head down to Chicago 1 and do a makeup meeting, go visit the Paul Harris home, sort of the Mount Vernon of Rotary, go visit the Paul Harris grave. So there's a lot to do Rotary-wise in Chicago, in Evanston, and I very much hope to be able to see as many of you in person as I can once we're past this terrible pandemic. So thanks again for having me, and all the best.
Well, thank you so much, John, for providing the framework from which we can create stronger Rotary clubs. Now, John is willing to stay with us to answer your questions, so let's keep him busy. Eric Weiler from Iowa City Noon Rotary has a question for John.
Yes, John, great to meet you virtually. My name is Eric Weiler. I'm president-elect of the Iowa City Noon Rotary Club. I want to thank you for your leadership with Rotary. And with our club, as an incoming club president, one of my goals is to get people more engaged in the club. We have a lot of our members, you know, they say, I found out I first became a Rotarian, not the first year, but maybe the second year when I did a community service project, or the third or fourth year when I did an international project. But I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on how we can move some of our more passive members to more active, engaged Rotarians so we can retain them and get them more involved in the club.
Well, I guess first, Eric, thank you for your kind thoughts, and great to meet you virtually as well. Yep. I think it's really a question of, you know, every person has their own interests, their own reason why they joined Rotary, and ask them, why did you join? What are you interested? What is your passion? And then try to cater to that passion. I think getting, you know, as I say, people come to Rotary for the fellowship, they stay for the projects, right? I mean, it's about rolling up your sleeves and doing things. And I know there's many clubs now that are basically saying new members, the second day on the job, they're given an assignment. They get involved in a project. They're given the ability to do something with a project from day one, to get them engaged, to get them working. Another thing I would suggest is that one of the beauties of Rotary is that we have this extraordinary global, regional, national platform. And part of one of our 4 priorities is to enhance the strategic plan is to enhance our impact. In fact, our new grant model, or not so new anymore, from 2013 at the Rotary Foundation, was to really incentivize through these global grants clubs and districts do projects that are larger, more scalable, more impactful. And so as you start thinking about your projects, think about how can you partner with other clubs? How can you do district-wide projects? How can you partner, obviously, with clubs all around the world and really deliver a project that is sort of, rather than solving 1% of 100 problems, solves 100% of one problem. And the more impactful, larger, scalable projects we do, not only do we get more bang for our buck, but our members feel even a greater pride of what we're achieving. Our PR visibility increases. That brings more members, more people to do the work, more donors, et cetera, et cetera. And you create this very positive, continuously improving circle. So again, there's no one size that fits all, Eric. It's really who your members are and what they're interested in, and then catering to what they'd like to see in their club, you know.
Great. Thank you for that great feedback, John.
And just a reminder to all of the participants that we have about 35 minutes for John to stay with us and to ask your question. And please pose your question in the question and answer area, not in the chat box. So we look forward to all of your questions. And our next one comes from Michelle Seitz. She is president-elect of the Rotary Club to End Human Trafficking. Is there a plan to allow Rotarians to join more than one Rotary Club? Michelle.
Yep, that is my question. We are a virtual and international club. And because of our international nature and the fact that we will always be on Zoom, I would love to be able to also join a local club. And I'm in Texas, to put a point on the fact that when you guys go live, I can't join you in Minnesota, but I would love to be able to join my local club here in Texas and spend time doing local projects, as well as being part of an international club that meets via Zoom all the time.
Michelle, thanks. Good to meet you virtually. Thanks for the question. I hope I get this right, but I think you formally, in terms of the record keeping, you need to be officially a member of one club. There's nothing to keep you from being a member of another club, participating in another club, and joining a club. And in fact, you have a lot of examples of Rotarians who are, winter in one place and then summer in another place, and are actively attending meetings of two Rotary clubs in their district. So if I'm not mistaken, you have, you're officially a member of one club. There should be nothing to keep you from, if you're, your life is a seasonal life, to participate, join, and actively participate in another club where you may be during the second half of the year. So
Perfect.
go for it.
Good. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Michelle. We have a question for John. It is, can you share some really successful and interesting fundraising models that you have seen?
Well, again, everything, it's very regional and country and culturally specific, right? So what works in one area may not work in another. But my home district, I still remember the Rotary Club of Kyiv in Ukraine, which was my original Rotary Club way back in the early 90s when I lived there. That our district held a very successful virtual beer tasting event. And people were buying and selling beers virtually, and it was an auction, and they raised a boatload of money. And I think the person that donated them actually was delivered a case of beer to their home. But very successful. And then they followed it up with a vodka tasting event. It worked very well there. I suspect there are parts of the world where that probably wouldn't go over as well. And so really the sky's the limit. It's, I've seen all kinds of auctions. I've seen, stuff that's, wow, that was an interesting thought. So really it's really what's going to work locally, unleash the creativity. And here's where I think one area where our Rotaractors can help. And again, it's different in different parts of the world. And Europe tends to have much more community-based clubs, and the U.S. university. And I'm not familiar with the status of Rotaract in the respective districts that are represented here. But our Rotaractors, they live in this space, right? I mean, for them, this is no big deal. They're very comfortable in this space, and they're also really creative when it comes to working in this space. And of course, as an organization, we're now involved in a huge effort to elevate Rotaract. Rotaract clubs are now members of the Association of Rotary Clubs. You can be a Rotaractor and a Rotarian at the same time. Rotaractors are, by virtue of being Rotaractors, are not Rotarians, but they can be simultaneously a member of a Rotaract in a Rotaract club. And so the whole movement is to really start bridging the gap between Rotaract and Rotary. Only 5% of Rotaractors, I think, globally become Rotarians. And that's a tragedy, where you've got young men and women who are passionate about our organization, and 95% of them don't become Rotarians. So let's utilize this crisis to really work more closely together with our Rotaractors, both on the technology front, on the project front, break down those generational barriers, and help facilitate that glide path from Rotaract to Rotary.
This next question from Aaron Mueller ties into that, John. He asks, in your view, what specifically needs to change to attract younger members?
Well, we have to offer a product they want to buy, right? I mean, it's what's the value proposition for them? They have limited time and resources, and they're going to spend that on the things that they feel give them the greatest value and the greatest interest. Our sense is, as we do our surveying and all that younger people are really interested, tend to be very interested in causes. They tend to be less interested in structure and formality and all that sort of stuff. They're interested in an experience that lets them go in, make a difference, but not have it be all consuming. And so as we think about new club models, perhaps might be more attractive to a younger demographic, let's think about cause-based. Let's think about cause-based clubs, for example. We've got these passport clubs that are becoming really, really popular. They don't meet the rules, but they're really turning to be very popular. The original one, of course, started out in California, and that one they only met 6 times a year. I mean, so every other month, and then every other month they'd have a social, and so you had 12 meetings a year basically, and then you had to also either spend 40 hours per year doing community service in one or more projects in the district, or you could donate $1,000 to the Rotary Foundation. So that's why it's called a passport club, where you could do 40 hours with one club, or 20 hours with 2 clubs, or 8 hours with 5 clubs. And if you found the club you really liked, you could join that club or carry on being a passport member. And that club's really ballooned in terms of its membership, and a lot of different variants are springing out all over the place. So again, it's a matter of offering a value proposition, something someone's going to want to buy, and not getting hung up in my view, and I may be heretical in saying this, not getting hung up in the rules, but getting hung up in what's going to sell in the marketplace without violating or without undercutting our core values, which could never change.
And if someone wants to find more information about passport clubs, I imagine that's available on the RI website.
You know, I don't know if we have a special section on the past, but there's like I think they've actually set up like an association of passport clubs, or they're all working. I think so. But I think it was near San Jose where the first one started. In fact, I'm speaking to a new one that's going to be chartered in Austria. There's a new one that's going to be chartered in Austria in a couple of weeks. But the model's catching on.
Very interesting. Another question, does Rotary have a digital platform available for use for fundraisers?
There is a tool that we've put out that allows you to, as a fundraising tool, to post your fundraising activity and get people to contribute, etc. So yes, we do have a tool, a digital tool that is fundraising specific.
Okay, and the easiest way to find that?
On the website.
Okay, speaking of easy, what are the easiest ways to find virtual clubs?
You know, we don't have a directory. Well, I mean, our e-clubs by definition are 100% virtual clubs, and so obviously every e-club is. The e-clubs are in the official directory, and you can search through the club directory on our website. I think I'm not sure, but there may be a way to just search for e-clubs. I'm not sure, but you know, our virtual clubs are basically historically been our e-clubs, and of course we're seeing a huge surge now in e-clubs after COVID. We're seeing a lot of hybrid clubs now. That seems really going to be the trend. From what we can tell coming out of this, is there's going to be significantly larger numbers of hybrid clubs coming out of this crisis.
Thank you. In the chat link, I noticed that someone has included, in the chat box, someone has included a link regarding passport clubs. Okay. So please check on that. Another question, this one from Juan Arias. With the number of satellite clubs increasing, what tools will be provided by RI to help these clubs in My Rotary site? Now only the main club can track their goals. Only the main club has the meeting place and time published, etc.
Yeah, that's a very good suggestion. It's one that we're looking into and hopefully we'll be implementing at some point in the future.
All right. Todd Thompson is president-elect of the Northfield, Minnesota Rotary Club. He says, we have an active climate action team. With the environment being a new focus for Rotary, do you see global grants with this focus being encouraged and funded?
Yes, historically when we moved to our new grant model, we had 6 areas of focus, and we've now added a 7th called area of focus for the environment. The standards are out, the criteria for those are out, and we very much hope that Rotarians embrace this 7th area of focus. We introduced it because our surveying was showing that it's very important. Many Rotarians care about this issue, particularly younger people really are very, very focused on the environment. And so we added it as a 7th area, very excited about that. And yes, we encourage anyone who's passionate in this space to put together global grant proposals and apply for them. Absolutely.
Thank you. We have a question from Ashok Patel. Thank you, sir, for your clear and compelling challenge to our 5 districts. How do we coordinate Rotary's experience with polio eradication to equitable, inclusive, and efficient COVID vaccine distribution, or surveillance? Which vaccine, Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, should NC Pets support with our community leaders, public health officials, advisors? Anti-vaccination countermeasures too. Dr. Osterholm from Minnesota is on President's COVID task force, and I'm sure the world is watching too.
Right. Well, first of all, our polio infrastructure is a gift to humanity, and one of the challenges we're going to face when we eradicate polio, and we will, is how to preserve that infrastructure. It was, as you're aware, very successfully deployed in West Africa. during the Ebola crisis to stop the spread of Ebola in places, particularly in Nigeria. And so now we need to pivot, and we are, the GPIs, how do we then utilize the polio infrastructure globally with respect to the COVID crisis and the vaccination efforts? The Rotary International Board has adopted and the foundation, a position of where we're encouraging clubs and districts to get actively engaged in measures that are appropriate in their specific regions or countries with respect to vaccine acceptance, with respect to breaking down barriers to vaccination. We are utilizing the polio infrastructure in parts of the world for surveillance, for advocacy, et cetera. And that's really, I think, the strength that we bring to this COVID effort is our advocacy, the reach that we have, the community, the relationships we have in the community. And the focus, we're not going to focus globally on vaccine distribution and all that. I don't think that's our strength at this point. It might be with respect to some local activities, but it's really on the advocacy piece. It's on the vaccine acceptance piece, working with communities to try to get everyone as vaccinated as quickly and effectively as we can. As to the 3 vaccines, I'm no doctor, but certainly the guidance from the health experts are that grab the first one you can. They're all effective, they all do the job, and they're all going to be an extremely important part of getting to herd immunity and getting past this crisis.
Staying on the topic of vaccines, Jennifer Rollins asks, if Polio Plus or other current club projects don't resonate with potential members, how do we convince them that Rotary should be their service organization of choice? In other words, Rotary in their mind sounds like maybe just one more service organization that wants their membership.
Well, obviously, there's obviously tremendous competition out there. All kinds of, I think what's unique about Rotary, in my view, at least, is there's a lot of organizations out there that allow you to do good in the world. And there's a lot of places you can network professionally. And we kind of are one of the few organizations that actually bring those 2 elements together, that kind of intersection between commerce and cause, where, in fact, if you think about it, Paul Harris originally set Rotary up in 1905 as the first LinkedIn, before anybody had heard of LinkedIn. It was about professional connections and contacts. In fact, Chicago One, the original club, they had a rule that every member in those early years had to bring a business lead for another member at every meeting. And if you went like 2 or 3 meetings without bringing a business lead to another member, they'd ask you to kindly leave the club. And so we really were, it was that professional networking, that LinkedIn aspect of it, that was really where Rotary was started. And of course, the service component was added subsequent to that. So we're that unique intersection between commerce and cause. Secondly, the beauty of Rotary, in my view, is that it's wide open for whatever your interest or passion is. I mean, yes, polio is our sort of big global initiative, but that just scratches the surface. We have all the projects that are happening in our 7 areas of focus for global grants. District grants, every district is completely free to utilize their district grant funding for whatever they feel is appropriate, as long as it meets some general charitable need. And of course, every club is free to fundraise and get involved and engage in whatever activity meets passion, youth exchange, you name it. Our RAGs, Rotary Action Groups that really focus on specific issues, fantastic RAGs. We have the Rotary Fellowships. I mean, the wine tasting, the golfing, the yachting, the motorcycling, the biking, I mean, you name it, it's there in Rotary. And a lot of these fellowships are fantastic. They organize tennis tournaments all over the world. They organize yacht, boating excursions all over the world, wine tasting all over. I mean, I think very often Rotarians don't quite appreciate the scope and breadth of stuff that's available to you as a Rotarian if you just want to go out, if you're interested and want to go out and do things. So that would be my answer, is that there's a little bit of everything for someone in Rotary if you really know where to look.
Thank you for emphasizing that. That's a very good point. Elsa has a question. Is there any technical help available for clubs that may want to set up hybrid type virtual and in-person meetings after COVID?
Yeah, I think we have put out there is a video that was put out by a group of Rotarians in California. It's kind of a tutorial on how to put on a hybrid meeting. And I thought that was a very good tool. And of course, you've got all of the other materials on the Rotary Learning Center. They're not specifically focused on hybrid meetings, but on the whole panoply of things about running an effective club and putting together effective club meetings, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, and again, I think that's going to be one of the challenges. I would urge the governors on this, governor-elects on this, to put together in your district a group of Rotarians who are really tech savvy and are willing to act as technical consultants to clubs and Rotarians in the district to really try to maximize this new opportunity of technology and utilizing it, just like we're doing with these district international service chairs that are trying to pull together in each district experts on the various 7 areas of focus to help Rotarians put together better global grant proposals. I would certainly urge you also to put together a sort of a technical team in each of your districts that can act as a sounding board and as a consulting company, in fact, to Rotary clubs who really want to embrace technology and move it to a new level.
Thank you, John. And in the chat box, I see that Jim Cook has added a link about setting up hybrid meetings for Rotary. So check out the chat box and that link. Briefly, would you answer Joe Hayes's question about expanding on the data of members leaving between 2 and 3 years? He said from observing for many years, he would agree with the 2nd and 3rd years being very critical.
Yeah, I mean, we just, we do the surveys, and the data is what it is. And again, it shows clearly globally, and again, it varies from region to region, country to country, but globally, at least, the longer you stay in Rotary, the less likely you are to leave. And that danger point is that the 1st to 3 years, but particularly between the 2nd and 3rd year. That's just, and what it's showing us, I guess, is that people kind of join, they kind of hang in there for a while, and then they just say, no, this really wasn't what it was cracked up to be or what I was interested in doing. And that's a real shame, because it's not like most people are leaving within the first 2 or 3 months. They're leaving mostly after 2 or 3 years, which means that the club has not done a good job of really retaining them, because they've hung around for 2 years. And that still wasn't enough to give them something that they find interesting and valuable in a Rotary experience. That's very different than I just showed up after 2 weeks where I was, this wasn't it. So it really does show that there's a lot we can do and need to be doing to retaining our members, because nobody should be leaving Rotary after 2 years if we've given them the value proposition that they're looking for.
Okay, thank you. We have about 5 minutes left and several questions, so we'll see if we can get to most of them. Karen has a question. She said, issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion have been flashpoints in society and in our district. I'm wondering what efforts RI will be making to reflect on its own history and become more welcoming to a broader spectrum of people.
Well, certainly the organization is embarking now on a very aggressive and broad-ranging diversity, equity, inclusion initiative. Rotary International Board has set up, there's a task force that's specifically designed to put that into place. We are hiring an outside firm, a global firm that specializes has a very strong diversity, equity, inclusion track record to help guide our organization in terms of this issue. Now, again, it's a global initiative, and the issues vary from country to country and from region to region, and the issues of inclusion and diversity vary. In some places, it's one of gender, it's age, other it's ethnicity. I mean, it varies across the spectrum, but it's something that the organization is confronting head on and addressing and tackling. And I think we're going to hopefully, move the needle fairly substantially on that issue.
Thank you. A question from Northern Black Hills Rotary Club. Rotary's influence on the United Nations used to be very important since the creation of the UN. Is it still the case today? And what would be the vision that you will have through the UN?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And historically, we've had very close ties with the UN, as I think most of us are aware. There are some 45 or more Rotarians participating in the various working groups in San Francisco in 1945 when the UN Charter was drafted. There was really a resolution adopted by Rotarians in the UK that led to the creation of UNESCO. And then, of course, our relationship with the UNICEF and other UN agencies when it comes to our polio eradication efforts. We do have a seat as we're a recognized nonprofit. We actually have a small office at the United Nations. We have Rotary official representatives to the United Nations, as well as to many of the other United Nations organizations throughout the world. So the relationship is longstanding and it's deep. And today, it's perhaps strongest in our polio eradication efforts, but it's clearly something we continue to look at, continue to pursue, and we are deepening our relations with the various UN agencies that are located in various countries around the world, looking for ways to cooperate and do things together.
Thank you. And we have a question going back to the cause-based clubs, and this is interesting. They're wondering about how do cause-based clubs work with conventional clubs that are working on projects on those causes? And I think, an example might be the Rotary District that I'm involved with, 5610. One of our causes is human trafficking. Now, there's also a cause-based club on human trafficking that we heard from a little bit earlier. So how would we work together with a cause-based club in our district?
And there's also, it's also the RAG. There's a very, very strong human trafficking RAG, the Rotary Action Group that's involved as well. And so it goes back to that concept, Ginger, that I was talking about earlier of, 1 + 1 is 3. It's all about partnering, right? Look at polio. We're successful in the polio eradication effort because we've got this great partnership and everybody has their role to play and everybody has their contribution to make. And if each one of us tried to do it on its own, we wouldn't be able to pull it off. And similarly with the cause, whether it's human trafficking or whatever, it's about partnering. It's about getting together and trying to do things that are larger, scalable, and bolder. And so if there is a club that's cause-based, is focused on it, and Rotarians in the district that are interested in it, and their clubs may also be interested, well, let's get together, put together a larger, more scalable, more impactful projects so that you can accomplish much, much more than each of you could be doing on your own. So I think it really is as straightforward as identifying whether they be in a cause-based club or just Rotarians in sort of regular clubs, pulling together and thinking bigger, bolder, and doing things that are more impactful, getting more bang for the buck, better publicity, making a greater impact.
Thank you so much, John Huco from Rotary International, for your insight, for the overview of how Rotary internationally is going, and for emphasizing the 5 action steps that we need to take. So we'll all become stronger Rotary clubs because of your influence, and we thank you very much for that. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and again, best of luck to all of you as you assume your positions next Rotary year, and stay safe.